Chapter 1. Shared Roots. Around 3,000 years ago, the East Slavic tribes in Eastern Europe, known as the Rus, established the Kievan Rus, a medieval state centered in Kiev. Despite centuries of wars and invasions from Mongols, Poles, and others, the Rus tribes developed distinct yet related identities. By the 12th century, political and cultural differences, symbolized by preferences like vodka in Russia versus horilka in Ukraine, led to the formation of three independent states, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. United by shared ancestry, language, and Orthodox Christianity, their paths diverged under external pressures. Chapter 2. Imperial Domination. In the 17th century, Ukraine's territory was divided between the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Russia. To suppress Ukrainian identity and prevent uprisings, Russia enforced Russification, banning the Ukrainian language, promoting vodka, and imposing Russian cultural norms. Ukrainians became foreigners in their own land, setting the stage for centuries of tension. Chapter 3. World War I and Division. World War I, 1914 to 1918, saw Russia, Entente, and Austria-Hungary, Central Powers, on opposing sides, with Ukraine caught in the middle. Ukrainians were conscripted into both armies, forced to fight each other despite shared heritage. Austria-Hungary treated Ukrainian soldiers with suspicion, fearing pro-Russian sympathies, and subjected them to harsh treatment. The war's end in 1917 brought chaos. Austria-Hungary collapsed, and Russia descended into civil war. Chapter 4. Ukrainian Independence and Soviet Formation. Amid Russia's 1917 civil war, Ukrainians seized the opportunity to declare independence, forming the Ukrainian People's Republic. However, the Bolshevik Revolution, led by Vladimir Lenin, established Soviet Russia. Ukraine became a battleground between pro-Soviet Bolsheviks and anti-Soviet nationalists. With Soviet support, the Bolsheviks prevailed, and in 1922, Ukraine joined Russia and other republics to form the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, with Lenin as its leader. Chapter 5. Stalin's Eyrie and the Holodomor. After Lenin's death in 1924, Joseph Stalin assumed leadership. In 1932 to 1933, a devastating famine, known as the Holodomor, killed millions in Ukraine. Many Ukrainians blamed Soviet policies, accusing Stalin of deliberately starving them, while others attributed it to crop failures. The tragedy, still debated today, deepened Ukrainian resentment toward Soviet rule, straining their bond with Russia. Chapter 6. World War II and Nazi Occupation. In 1941, Nazi Germany invaded the USSR, occupying Ukraine. Despite past grievances, Ukrainians fought alongside the Soviet Red Army. The Nazis captured Western Soviet territories, including Ukraine, within months. Under Hitler's orders, approximately 6 million Jews in Poland and Ukraine were executed, and non-Jews faced forced labor and resource plunder. In 1945, the Soviets defeated Germany, liberating survivors from concentration camps. Chapter 7. Cold War Superpowers. Post-World War II, the USSR and the United States emerged as superpowers, entering the Cold War, a race in arms, technology, and global influence. The U.S. formed NATO in 1949, uniting anti-Soviet nations, while the USSR invested heavily in Ukraine, transforming it into a key industrial hub with 20% of its budget. However, economic ties mask growing ideological divides. Chapter 8: Soviet Decline and Chernobyl. By the late 1980s, falling oil prices crippled the Soviet economy, reliant on oil exports. The government printed money to cover salaries, triggering hyperinflation and public hardship. In 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in Ukraine caused widespread radioactive contamination, costing the USSR $18 billion and fueling public discontent. Political and economic crises pushed the Soviet Union toward collapse. Chapter 9: Soviet Dissolution. In December 1991, the USSR dissolved, splitting into 15 independent states, including Russia, Ukraine, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Estonia. Russia and Ukraine became neighbors, but Ukraine inherited 1,900 nuclear warheads, making it the world's third-largest nuclear power. In 1993, Ukraine signed an agreement to transfer its arsenal to Russia in exchange for recognition of its sovereignty, leaving Russia as the top nuclear power. Chapter 10: Post-Soviet Struggles. Post-Soviet Ukraine faced rampant inflation, unemployment, mafia activity, and corruption. A president fled in the 1990s after embezzling over $200 million. In 1997, Ukraine and Russia signed a friendship treaty, but tensions persisted. Russia relied on Ukrainian pipelines to supply 70% of Europe's oil and gas, creating economic leverage but also friction. Chapter 11: Political Polarization. In 2004, Ukraine's presidential election pitted pro-Western Viktor Yushchenko against pro-Russian Viktor Yanukovych. Yushchenko's victory, backed by the Orange Revolution, signaled a Western tilt. In 2008, Ukraine applied to join NATO, alarming Russia's Vladimir Putin, who viewed NATO as a threat. Russia used economic pressure, demanding Ukraine repay a $2 billion gas debt in 2009. When Ukraine cut Russia's gas pipeline to Europe, Russia halted supplies, costing both nations billions. Chapter 12: Euromaidan and Crimea's annexation. In 2013, Yanukovych, now president, rejected EU integration, sparking the Euromaidan protests. Police violence killed hundreds, and Yanukovych fled to Russia. In February 2014, Russian forces seized Crimea, a strategically vital peninsula. A controversial March 2014 referendum, condemned by the US, EU, and others, showed 97% of Crimeans, mostly ethnic Russians, favoring annexation. Russia incorporated Crimea, escalating tensions. Chapter 13: Eastern Ukraine Conflict. Pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk and Luhansk regions declared independence as the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, backed by Russian weapons and fighters. The ensuing war between Ukrainian forces and separatists killed tens of thousands and displaced millions. A 2015 ceasefire, Minsk II, failed to hold, and Ukraine's economy plummeted, making it one of Europe's poorest nations. Chapter 14: Modern War and Global Impact. In 2019, comedian Volodymyr Zelensky, a NATO supporter, became Ukraine's president. In 2020, Ukraine reapplied for NATO membership, prompting Russia to amass troops along its border. On February 24, 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, sparking a full-scale war. Thousands of civilians have died, millions are displaced, and global energy prices have soared due to Western sanctions on Russia. The conflict, with no end in sight, continues to devastate both nations and reshape geopolitics. Chapter 15: An Uncertain Future. The Russia-Ukraine conflict, rooted in shared history and fractured by modern ambitions, has left countless victims in an unstable region. Ukraine's alignment with the West and Russia's assertive policies fuel ongoing strife. As the world grapples with economic fallout and humanitarian crises, the path to peace remains elusive, leaving Ukraine's future uncertain and its people resilient amid tragedy.